Well, let's do some analysis. This is an excerpt from one of the early Beethoven piano sonatas. It's just 4 bars, and it's a single phrase. And what we've focused on in the last couple of videos is diatonic substitution and cadences. So in particular, we want to be looking for those things. And this excerpt offers an example of both of those things. It also lets us review some of the other harmonic progressions, especially with inversions that we've seen so far. First thing I want to do is harmonic analysis. And you know, in this example now we've got some non-chord tones. We don't have many, but we do have some here in the very beginning. Before you do any analysis, I know a lot of times students try to do analysis by sight, and that is, it's not ideal. Analysis should be a description of what we hear more than what we see. This can be difficult if your ears aren't so developed, and if you can't really hear tonics and dominants and subdominants, then hearing a piece doesn't always help you analyze it. But it certainly does help you develop a sensitivity for tonics and dominants and subdominants and things like that, certain kinds of progressions, even being able to hear certain things happening in the voice leading. So there's always, I guess, an argument to listen to something before you even analyze it. And let's do that here. Okay, so now we can hear, if we listen to this, this is the end of the phrase, and we can already hear that it's not, when we get here, that it's not closed. It doesn't sound complete. So we know we probably have some kind of inconclusive cadence, so it's definitely not perfect authentic cadence. We'll come back to this when we get through the harmonic analysis, but it is something to be already listening for. We hear the phrase, and when we hear the phrase, we hear whether or not it needs to continue in order to end the piece and get closure, or whether or not we can just simply end the piece. Let's go here. Well, we're in E major. We look at the key signature. We start with an big E chord. So suggests it's probably E major. So let's already start with the Roman numeral analysis. And, you know, I always recommend doing Roman numeral analysis before you try to figure out what the non-chord tones are, and that just sort of makes sense. Why? It makes sense because if you try to figure out non-chord tones before you know what the chords are, it makes it very difficult. So we do this in a particular order for a reason. We find our chord progression first, our harmonic progression first. Now we look at this. So this is a bit convoluted, but it should be comforted in that it's only chord tones, but they're sort of in an unusual combination. We've got here's the root, the 5th, the 3rd, and the 7th. So we have a 5, 4, 2. And of course, as you might remember, our the 4-2 chord usually almost always goes to a 1-6. So let's see if that's what actually happens, and no surprises here. We get a 1 chord in first inversion, 1-6. So this is just following a sort of very common harmonic progression. Also, let's look here. Look, we've got our augmented 4th here, right? And if you recall from voice leading, talking about the voice leading of this, the augmented 4th goes out, and this is our leading tone, this D sharp, and it resolves to the tonic. This is our 4th scale degree, and it resolves down to the 3rd scale degree. So this is actually very normal voice leading right here. Good. Anyway, here we've got another 5 chord, root, 3rd, 5th, another 3rd and a 7th here. So it's a 5-7 in, well, the 5th is in the bass, so that makes it a 5-4-3. Whoops. Good, 5-4-3. Look at this, and now we've got actually a very fast harmonic rhythm. 1 chord per 16th note. Here we had 1 chord per beat. Now we have 1 chord per 16th note. We get 1 in first inversion, 5 in first inversion, root position 1. And now, oh, you see the bass and you think, it's a 4 chord. But then let's look up at the other notes. We have an F sharp, actually, F sharp minor chord, root, 3rd, and 5th, and the 3rd is in the bass. F sharp in the key of E is the 2nd scale degree. So this is a 2 chord in first inversion. 2, 5. So here we have this substitution. Rather than 1, 4, 5, we have 1, 2, 6, 5. Again, we look here, we've got root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. It's like a chord spelled upside down in 6th. Yeah? Root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. So that's our 5 again. 5, 4, 2. 7th is in the bass. What's going to happen next? Well, it's a 5, 4, 2. It should resolve to a 1 in first inversion, and in fact, it does. Good. And again, we're kind of getting the same kind of progression we had here. We're going to get a 5, 4, 3, to a 1 in root position. And again, same thing. We see this is the 4th scale degree, so we think maybe it's a 4 chord, but no, actually when we put it all together, we see we've got an F sharp here. It's an F sharp minor chord again, so it's a 2, 6, and then we have 5. So we have 2 instances here where we have a 2, 6 instead of a 4 going to 5. This is our subdominant. This is our dominant. It's tonic, subdominant to dominant. And then kind of this is more or less a repetition of this thing here. Okay, so now let's go back to talking about cadence. We see that we've got this 2, 6, 5. We're ending on a 5 chord. It's in a sense of inconclusion or inconclusiveness. So this must be a half cadence. So we write that down as an HC. We place it above. In typical analysis, we place this above. Good. So we have an idea of what the cadence is. Now we should go through and look at the non-chord tones. We only have non-chord tones in here. We don't have any non-chord tones here. They're all chord tones. So let's look at them. Step down. This F sharp in an E major chord is a non-chord tone. Step down, step up. So step into it, step out of it, opposite direction. We've got a neighbor tone. Step up, leap out into a chord tone. This is a classic example of an escape tone. Like I had said, what you commonly see is this step up, leap down by a third, and that's exactly what we see here. And then there's a kind of pattern here, so we might think, we would be wise to assume that the non-chord tones are also used in a pattern, and that ends up being the case. Here we have another neighbor tone, ends, step up, leap out. That's our escape tone. And there you have it, a sort of general analysis of the non-chord tones, the harmonic progression, as well as the cadence of this first phrase of the second movement of Beethoven's Piano Sonata, Opus 1, number 3.